All right, I got my thing up. You ready, Tanya?
I am ready.
All right,
I'm ready
sweet.
for this.
I don't see any faces, so this makes me a little nervous. Just that I can't see anybody.
I'll be everything for you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for turning on your camera. It helps so much to see smiles. Welcome to UX and ATX. I'm Cindy Brummer. I am one of the organizers of UX and ATX. And what we do as an organization, if you're not familiar, is we support creating a community of designers, no matter where they are in their career. So that's really what we're driven to do. We started in Austin, but we have grown. Our membership is now all across the United States, and I believe in at least 4 international countries. So we're definitely not just in ATX. You can find us online at uxandatx.com. We are also have presence on Meetup, obviously, on LinkedIn, Facebook. And when you want to get in touch with us, in between, there's a chatter going on Slack, and we'll share our Slack community join link in the chat so that you can, if you're not already there, not already talking to us. We try to do meetups every month, and we try to do them so that designers have some sort of knowledge and information. So our theme for this quarter is all about the different career paths that designers can take, that because UX is such a huge umbrella, and it intersects with many other things. So tonight's discussion on content is just one. We're actually going to talk next month about accessibility and how UX designers could go down the accessibility design path. That one will be on May 27th at 6 p.m. We are currently gathering panelists, but I'm very excited because one of our confirmed panelists actually runs a meetup on accessibility out of the Bay Area and is an accessibility designer for CVS. So that one, I'm sure, will be an amazing event. Tonight, let's focus on tonight. Unfortunately, 2 of our panelists let us know that they were not able to join us, and it kind of happened all today. We didn't want to postpone necessarily because we had such a good discussion plan. So we decided that rather than cancel tonight, what we would do is continue with Tanya Harris, who's graciously said that she will be the sole person, and we'll do more of a casual interview with her. Tanya is a senior content strategist at eBay. She is passionate about the words we see. When we open our apps, when we go to a website, when we use our internal tools at work, or receive an automated email after making a purchase, all those kinds of areas. So starting first as a librarian, before dabbling in software engineering, which was not her passion, Tanya transitioned to her content career about 10 years ago. She began as a knowledge management intern, then moved into content design and content strategy. She now leads content for customer service at eBay, managing a wide variety of content types for 21 countries and 10 languages, and that's just on a good day. Welcome, Tanya. So glad you're here.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much. And I'm so glad so many people are interested in content.
Yeah. And so Tanya let me know that questions from everyone is definitely welcome. So please go ahead and drop those questions in the chat. She might, want some clarification. So she might ask you to come off mute if you're comfortable. But I have a whole bunch of questions for Tanya. And the first one I think is probably like the basis, just the basics. Like, let's step way back. What is content?
Okay. Content is 90% of what you see. It's the words you see on the screen. It's the buttons that you press that have words on them. It's the links. It's the title of the page that you go to. In your app, when you open that app, it's the very first time you open it, it might have some instructions in it. And if it has words, somebody had to choose those words. It's, if you've ever made a phone call and you're going through that voice prompt system, that automated voice prompt system, that's content design, that's content strategy. And it's called IVR in our language. If you've ever used a chatbot, which are getting so popular today, that's part of it. If you work for a company that has internal tools and those tools have words on it, that's content. So anywhere you see words, you know that's content, and content design, content strategy. So whether or not you've invested in it makes a difference, but that is content. And then on occasion, it's the spoken word too, especially in the automated area, automated voice messages, automated systems.
Got it. So when we talk about content design, which you mentioned a little bit about it, how do you define content design itself? And then what does it mean to you as a content strategist?
I also want to say hi to Rachel, who just mentioned she's also a content designer. She's down in San Antonio. So what does content design mean? Companies know that they have a problem with words. They don't always know how to fix it. The people that know how to fix it, that's your content designer. Those are the people that come in and assess the context that's being presented. What's the context for the end user? And what are the best words to select for that context? And and we work collaboratively with the UX designer. Where's the best place to put those words? Is the button best at the top? Is the button best at the bottom? What does the word say inside that button? We help to design the look, feel, and tone of the words. Yeah. And it sounds so easy to do that. I mean, and let's take an email, for example. Let's just take an email that you purchased something on Amazon yesterday. You got an email that said you made a purchase. Most of us won't look at that email unless there's a problem. We just know that you get the subject line. That subject line, somebody designed that subject line so that way you knew which item you purchased. So that way it's right there in the title. Maybe it has an item number or a date to help you find it later on. And then if you do have to open it, we want to give you concise information in a tone that matches what my organization, what I want you to feel about me. And all of that's within the element of design.
Mm-hmm. So I guess my next question is, so in the field of UX, where does UX intersect with content design, content strategy?
This is an incredibly frank statement. 5 years ago, you could go on Amazon and you could not find but one book on UX content. Because the field was just beginning, UX, user experience, was just beginning to catch on to the fact that it needed people that were specialists in words. And it needed to pay attention to the words. So 5 years ago, you looked for a book on Amazon, and I know this because I looked, because I saw it coming. I saw this UX content design coming. And so where does it intersect? You're designing with lorem ipsum, and you're designing your page or your conversational bot, or you're designing anything with lorem ipsum. You're not designing around the customer experience. Nobody comes to a web page, nobody comes to an app for no content. So the words mean something. Even when you're playing an app, and I have this great little app, it's called Pop Time, and you put the little balls in order of colors, right? All right, that's okay. But then you've got a completion screen, and that completion screen says you won. Congratulations, you're up a level. Those are words that's conveying something to a customer. So what words did you pick there? And what we discover is developers are really good at developing. They're not really good at picking words.
I'm sorry, that just hits home.
Yep. Designers, a lot of designers are really good at designing a layout. They're not good at picking words. So they oftentimes lean too much on the organization's words and not enough on the customer's words. Where does content specialists, where do the passionate content people come in? We're the ones that come in and say, hey, this is how the customer would phrase it. Hey, this is what the customer wants to hear. Hey, this is what the customer wants to experience. And then we work, I call it the tech content handshake. I refer to it all the time in my organization. Where's the tech content handshake? Because I need my UX people to design the UX, and they need me to design the content. And together we shake hands and we give the best experience for our customers.
Mm-hmm. This is.
I can feel me getting passionate.
So do you, as a, I should probably follow. I have a bunch of questions here, but this just kind of came up off of that. Is that how do you do research to understand how just like as a researcher we would do to create personas, to really understand like how they speak? Like how do you do that piece?
Yes. So it's the same element of creating personas and writing to those personas. I'm also testing the words, and here's an example of this. I'm working with an organization they've rewritten their automated emails. They're working on changing their voice and tone around their automated emails. And we're doing A/B testing against those automated emails. And we're checking a couple of different things. We're having focus groups with our customers to see, well, how did you feel after you received this unexpected email giving you bad news? Did you know what to do next after you received it? Which one did you like better? Did you like the short, direct version? Did you like what I call the chatty Cathy version? I don't say that to my customers, but that's what we're calling it internally, because it's we wanted to let you know. And what is the experience that made you feel more confident in me, the organization, that's sending you bad news? So there's also taxonomy work in content. So when you're dealing with help pages or any sort of help structure, help pages, help bots, chat bots, there's taxonomy work that goes there. And what's the customer's view of how the information should be organized? Unfortunately, too many organizations lean into what's my employee structure for routing this question, or what's my thoughts on how this information is grouped, and not enough into how the customers expect to see this information grouped up. A lot of what UX does in terms of research is similar to what content does in terms of research. We're just looking at it from different angles. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So
interesting.
I'm also looking at recontact rates a lot of times too in a corporation.
Recontact rates, as in like you have to keep touching base. Like how many times does it take to get to a customer?
Yep. And like if I have to send you a negative experience email, and I am so sorry, that item that you bought from Amazon yesterday was a counterfeit. Here's some options for you. That's a dramatic. If you spent $612 on an item and you get an email that says, hey, we've discovered it's counterfeit, you want to know what your next steps are. For me as a company, I also wanted you to be able to go through our automatic flow and get your refund. But if you have any questions, I want you to be able to call me. If you have questions and you call me, what did my email not answer for you? Mm-hmm. That drove that extra contact. Mm-hmm. So there's recontact rate and deflection rate. Deflection, how much can I steer away? Or how, and that's just one element of content. I'm talking about, at the break point, fix it. There's also earlier upstream. Let's talk about early, when you're first hooking a customer in. So Robert wants to use my Metro, my bus system, for the very first time, and he's investigating it. And he just wants to feel confident that he's going to be able to use it when he flies into Atlanta and he takes my Metro, right? So there you see my help page presented for Robert. And my job at that point is marketing. in content. I want you to feel confident. I want to hook you in. I want to bring you in. I want to make you a first-time user. Then after I get you, my content flips. Now I want to make you a loyalist. I want you to talk about me in a good place. If something goes badly for you, I want to be able to quickly use my content to fix it, to help continue to make you feel good about my organization. So throughout the thread of content, I'm constantly looking to what's your goal and how do I want you to feel? Mm-hmm. Cindy, I lost track. Did I answer the question you were asking?
Yes, yes, you did. And more. Gosh, there's so much I want to know about that specific path, but I feel like it would be helpful, especially for the folks here that may not already be content designers. What was your career journey like? How did you get to where you are now? I know we touched on it in your intro, but tell us more about that.
I got here by accident. I started off as a librarian years and years ago. Taxonomy 101, find a librarian. So I started off as a librarian, and then I decided to go into double back for a bachelor's degree in programming languages. Took to it like a duck takes the water, but when I discovered it was not my passion, props to anybody in this room who loves to program. It's not me. So I wandered away from that. And then I was starting to get bored with libraries, and I knew what libraries wasn't my place anymore. So I had gone back to school to become an adult basic education instructor. I wanted to teach English as a second language. And the first semester I went back to school, there was a class called knowledge management. And I was like, well, this class sounds kind of interesting. So I wandered into the class just because it sounded interesting and I needed an elective and it seemed to fit. And I walked into that class and it was like, Eureka, this shoe fits. This is what I was looking for. And knowledge management is a field where you take the information of an organization, everything that an organization knows, and you change it to be in a format that the person who needs it can use it at that moment in time. So content, change it into content that's usable. And so I started off as a knowledge management intern, and then from there grew to be a content designer. And then from there, now I'm a senior content strategist. Most of my focus today, though not my sole focus, most of my focus is in automation, automated email, chat bots, flows on site that help you automatically change things. So and I see, Kristen, I see that you're knowledge management and you can transfer to content design. My answer to that is not only yes, but definitely yes, because content design, especially right now, when the pandemic hit, suddenly everybody went home. But the organization stayed open. But you didn't have one employee leaning over to the other employee going, hey, what's up? How do we do this? It had to be documented somewhere so that way it could be more efficient. And you had customers asking questions and they had to do it in a more remote way because your employees that had been sitting at the telephone were no longer there. And so how do you keep up with the speed of business when business isn't coming into the office, when business is being done remotely? And that became words on your screen. And over the past, in the past 2 years, you have seen a 40% increase in content design and content strategist salaries in most areas. And you can't swing a cat without hitting a job opening. So with the content, it's just the way it is right now. And Kristen, your background with knowledge management would make you a shoo-in for content design when you're ready.
Well, what would be, well, I kind of want to start because I wanted to ask about where you see your career going, but I'd love to know, like, how does one make that leap from knowledge management to content design? What resources are there, classes? Like, how does one do that?
There are resources and there are classes. There's actually a class that is specific to UX content It was built out 3 or 4 years ago by a gentleman whose name escapes me right now. But there is a class for UX content strategy. But I would start simple. LinkedIn content strategy groups. That's one of, see what the conversations are. There is a great book, a phenomenal entry-level book that's both entry-level and deep enough to make sense. And it's writing content for UX. I think that's the name of it. I'll grab it and drop it into the chat box. And that is a fantastic book. It's paying attention to every time you go online or you're using an app. The next time you open DoorDash, pay attention to the words. The next time you get an email, pay attention to the words. Start experiencing the words and then understanding what those words are trying to make you feel and do. That begins to build your own cornerstones and be able to talk to it. And then when you're in an interview and you're talking about content and you're talking about content strategy, you can say, let's talk about emails. I get emails every day from Google and Chewy and FitFab. Can't remember what the other. And these are the differences between these 3 emails. And for your company, abc.com, I would love to know what it is that you want to have your company feel. What do you want it to express? Would you like to be like Chewy and have a fun and playful tone? Or do you feel more serious, like blah, blah, blah? And that shows that you're looking and you know what the world is doing out there in terms of its content. Go and find help bots and play on help bots. See what they're doing. See what the chat is doing. Take a look at links on pages and point out what the problems are for yourself. And so that way you can say in an interview, one of the things I'm really passionate about is ensuring that all links are cohesive amongst each other and that we're using the same language from page to page. And so you're building your own exposure to these different elements. Now, one of the easiest ways to get into content is actually pivoting through social media. I see that a lot right now. People start in social media, pivot over into content and content design. Social media is, if you're a lead, if you're managing a Twitter site, or if you're managing Facebook groups, if you got an Instagram or a TikTok and you're developing content, that's something that you can talk to. If you volunteer for a local organization and manage their social media, that gives you a bench into content. And you're still talking about the same thing. You are still designing content for the user experience in a social media platform. And that gives you a chance to broaden out from there.
What was the name of that book again? The one that you saw? Oh, writing content for UX.
Strategic writing for UX.
Yeah, because there was
I don't know the author. I know the first name is Tori. I don't remember the author's last name. Tori. Her last name begins with P. And I cannot remember her full last name. It's multiple syllables. I think it's POL something.
That's good. I like Robert's question because I think it dovetails really nicely. But what type of content is most attractive in a portfolio, especially if you don't have a lot of experience and you want to showcase your interest in this?
Okay, so let's go back to that social media. What have you done for social media? And can you leverage that? Can you have you ever helped design a web page? Or helped a friend design a web page? Can you leverage that? Can you go into somebody else's help bot and take screenshots of that and show where you would improve it if it was your own? It's an interesting thought process. So can you write out a and you can Google this, but write out a Twitter strategy or a social media strategy. And so your social media strategy would have a calendar, and this is what I release on each date. So on June 4th, I would release information that we are going to be at the Buzzy Park. And on June 15th, I would release pictures of people having fun at our event at Winchell Park. And June 18th, I'll post about the donation that we made to the Autistic Society of Texas. And that is, building out a content strategy over a month of what you're releasing when.
I have to say that there are plenty of nonprofit groups that are looking for people to help them with that, which is a great training ground, even if you don't have a lot of experience.
Yep.
I know, AAF Austin has a communications team, and they're looking for people right now to help with that. So you can get that experience.
And that's the thing. Content right now is a wide open field. Go get the volunteer experience for 3 to 4 to 6 months. Get your teeth wet or teeth sharpened, your claws sharpened, and then go start applying for content or content design jobs, knowledge management jobs. See what happens. Because this is a field that there's not enough people applying. Mm-hmm. So this entry level right now is phenomenal for people who are willing to do the legwork ahead of time, to do content in volunteer roles, and then pivot into that paid position.
And not to sound like I'm pitching, but UX and ATX needs help with that too. For anybody that wants to volunteer and step up. We definitely use it. Well, Tanya, where do you see your role going from here? You're a senior content strategist. Where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? Well, what would it look like? What is that role for you?
So keep in mind, I love what I do. So I am passionate about what I do. For myself in specific, I currently lead a team, and it's and most of my content is in the realm of customer service. So I lead customer service. I may pivot into to the product side of the house somewhere in the future and guide product content strategy. Let's go back to let's use eBay as an example. What are the words on the screen? What is the flow that we have for purchases? What's the words that you see? How do we even present money on the screen? Like for Great British Pound, does the pound come before or after the dollar bill or after the zeros? Those sorts of little nuanced sort of things that we design against, and different flows and pop-up boxes and such. The field itself, I want to talk to the field itself because that's what's important. I mentioned 5 years ago, you could not find a book on UX content. And now you can. And where the field is going is, again, organizations, Dell is a great example. We'll talk more about them in just a second. But organizations realized they had a word problem. They have a word problem. And poof, the UX content designer was born. And this is answering one of the questions that's in the chat box. So the UX content strategist was born. What is the user experience words on the screen that we want to lean into? So we're going to see more and more of that, and we're going to see more people specializing in it. We're going to see more research coming out about what words we should be using. We're going to see more research coming out about what kind of key performance indicators we need to be looking at. 8 years ago, knowledge management, which is one of the forefathers of content design and content strategy, knowledge managers were kind of spinning their wheels. How do we look at KPIs? What key performance indicators should we be looking at? And a bunch of word people not understanding your maths. So now you got content design coming in going, you know what, we have a better understanding of the math that we need to be answering to, the numbers we need to be answering to, the experience. So we're going to see more standardization around KPIs that we're going to answer to. We're going to see more work in inclusion and diversity. So that's definitely at the forefront. And we're going to see more and more automation. Companies are leaning into automation. It's not about big help pages. It's not about big web pages anymore. It's about just enough, just in time, just for you, from marketing to help to apps, experiences, and games. So that's where content's going to live. We're also seeing more hires into game development for content. So no, not as many developers aren't writing those little awful paragraphs at the bottom of games anymore. It's content developers and content designers that are doing that. So the difference between content design and UX writer, let's talk about that. The career field is fluid right now. You're going to hear a few different words. Copywriter. Remember back when I was talking about, and in a moment I want to talk about Dell. I want to make sure I talk about Dell. But remember I was talking about a moment ago, Robert, who's in this room, Robert Scott. He comes over to Metro, Atlanta Metro. He's purchasing something. And I really want it marketing sounding. That is a copywriter. Copywriter tends to be heavier in that marketing sound and that advertisement. Then you've got a UX writer. As a content designer, I'm going to say this is where I want my words. This is the voice tone, feeling of the word that I want. This is where I want to have labels. This is where I'm going to not use a link, but we're going to go ahead and use a button. Don't you agree with me, content UX designer? Yeah, handshake. Yep, we're going to use a button, not a link here. I'm designing the voice tone, flow, overall format. What's there? UX writer. I write the words. There's your difference between the two. That's your traditional difference between the two. They're getting more and more blended. UX writers graduate up to be content designers. That's what happens.
That makes a lot of sense. And that actually goes into my next question a lot, because there's so much related work that's going on. I have a friend who's a copywriter. We just talked about a UX writer. We talked about the content designer. Then there's conversation designers.
Yep.
And all those. So maybe if there's a way to kind of help us see the difference between like those other roles and the content designer,
Okay.
Where do they mix?
Okay, so I also want to talk about copywriters. Copywriters in the field of writing in general are people who view and make your words better. You already write the words and somebody comes in and edits behind them. That's your traditional copywriter. Today's copywriter is your advertisement person. So understand that even the singular word could be used in a couple of different ways. So content strategy sits at the top. What's the strategy of the organization? What are the decisions that's going to take us where we want to go? Design. What are the objectives? Strategy. Where do we want to go? Design. What's the objectives that are going to get us to go where we want to go? And then underneath that comes your specialties. Conversational writer. Help expert, UX writer, UX content writer, UX content design, website content design. So strategy, where do we want to go? Design, objectives to get there, the look and feel to get there. and then writing comes after that. Did I answer the question that you were asking?
I believe so. Yeah. So a conversation designer and a content designer don't sit kind of at the same level in terms of like designing like the how, the like
Right.
you know.
So I have a colleague of mine. His name is Steven. He's phenomenal. He never writes a word. He never writes a word. He's a conversational designer. He helps me build the tree for the conversation. What are the questions that we think the customer might ask? What are the fees for selling on eBay? That's the question that the customer might ask. Now, that's not an easy question to answer. Did you want to have a store, or did you want to? Are you a business or a person selling? I'll have to ask you a question back. So it's designing that conversation between you and the conversational bot. Mm-hmm. So it's never as easy as one question asked and one question answered. It's never that easy. So the conversational designer understands the customer's real goal. And if they don't understand the customer's real goal, they know the questions to ask to get there. Then the content writer, the content designer, helps pick the most right words with that. Because I would never let Steven write a single sentence because he is way too eBay speak. He would ask it like an internal employee would ask another internal employee. Mm-hmm. And that's when I slip in beside him, nudge him with my hip and say, let me get this going.
Got it.
So why isn't this grouped with UX researching?
Yeah, I like that question.
Specializations. Steven does UX research. Steve does UX research. He also has people that he can go out and do UX research that he can then lean on to make decisions. So there is synergy there. There is a reference there. Conversational design is a specialty. And so that's why it is that you have Steven helping to guide what does the architecture look like. It is the researcher's job to help inform and provide data. It is Steven's role to make decisions against that data.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Well, that reminds me, I mean, like there's so much misunderstanding around roles just in general around the digital realm, like not even around content. I know that, as a design firm, people assume we do SEO, but that's a very different specialty.
Yes, it is.
But it still overlaps, and it overlaps with content.
Yes,
because it's got to be good content for Google to like it.
Yep. Yep. And so, let's talk about search engine optimization. One of the things that we look at is how do we title our pages, because that helps with some search engine stuff. But at the flip side of that is if we do too much, we start playing with the algorithm. It knows that we're trying to game it, and then it makes us lower on the page. Damn you, Google. And so those are things that we have to consider when we're making a title of a page. And those little nuances. Now, I'm not an SEO expert. I know just enough to be dangerous and not enough to be intelligent. So I lean on my SEO experts to tell me to keep on top of what's happening in the different search engines and help me make sure that my stuff is up at the top. My team stuff is up at the top.
Yeah. Oh, and yeah, there's so much just in that area.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So have you had any mentors or coaches along the way?
Yeah, I have been lucky. So when I started my career field or my career in content, like I said, I started as an intern. And I walked in, it was a really interesting first day at work. Nobody spoke to me for 48 hours for 2 business days. They were too busy. True story. I walked in, I was like, where am I at and why am I here? I had no idea what was going on behind the scenes. And I'm like, this may not be the right place. Little did I know, it's the most perfect place in the world for me. Anyways, there were 2 people that were near me. A wonderful person whose name is Catherine Peterson. is with the double E's in Peterson. You can find her on LinkedIn. She's the director of content management at Salesforce now. I tried to get her to come in tonight, but she was traveling. She was working with me there at eBay, and I loved the way she wrote words. I loved how she made, I loved her voice and tone. I loved what the questions she asked, questions that she asked to gather information to find the right things to write. And I loved how she made sure she kept the customer at the center of everything when she did right. And then there was another employee there named Remington, Roy Lance. I can't remember where he's at right now, but he's now director of content at another organization. And Remington, his project management skills were incredible, which, by the way, if you have any project management behind you, get it on your resume for content. Project management is everything, because how many projects are you working on at any given time for developing content? 2, 3, 5. You're hitting milestones. You're giving milestones over to the UX designer who's waiting on you. Project management 101. Get it in there. So anyways, his project management ability was exceptional. So I looked to Kat Peterson for content, and I looked to Remington for his project management. I can confidently say I've hit both of those North Stars, and I've become both of those. The other person who was a great North Star for me is Sarah Evans. She is now director of content for one of the Amazon.com areas. So I think she's director of content for Amazon EU. And she, by the way, phenomenal woman. Go, if you can find her on LinkedIn. You know what? I'll share her LinkedIn with you, because I know she's always willing to build and mentor the next person. Nicest human in the world. She was also my supervisor. Nicest human in the world, and she was my supervisor. When? And about 2 years into the content role, I was going to quit. I was going to quit and go back to library science, because I was like, I can't do this. I'm not good enough. Oh my God, I don't know if this is right. And Sarah Evans walked me back from the cliff and was like, look, first couple of years you're in content, you're going to make mistakes. You're constantly going to trip over yourself. What you do is you watch the people that are really good, and you learn how they do what they do excellently. And you learn to get real comfortable with asking questions and not knowing anything. And as soon as I got really good going, I don't know what that acronym means. What does that mean? What do you mean when you say? What does that mean? It's not, as a content manager, it's not my job to know everything. It's my job to ask the right questions, to know what I need to know, to rewrite it in the way that the person who needs it can use it. And so the better I got at asking questions, the better I got at my job. And it takes some humble pie to do that, to ask, you know what, I have no clue what flow you're talking about on site. Can you share your screen with me and just let me take a look at that? Oh, that's what you're talking about. Can you go to the next screen? Because I haven't seen this before. I know I've been here 10 years, but I've never seen this. So
That's the biggest thing that separates, I would say, someone that is a junior level in their career from mid to senior level. And I say this all the time, and I see it repeated across disciplines where, at the junior level, it might actually be an advantage if you can get over feeling like you're stupid, being able to ask questions. And then that actually makes you shine as someone. And then I kind of say this almost like as a joke about developers, but I see this with designers too. Once you get some knowledge, you become less likely to ask questions because you think you know a lot. So you have to work really hard to overcome that overconfidence, you might say. And then when you get to the senior level, you realize how much more you really don't know. And you're confident enough to be able to ask a lot of questions.
So you get to the point where you're like, the more I know, the less I understand.
Yes,
that song exactly. Is so right.
And then I know that I say it in my classes, people ask me a question, I'm like, It depends because there's just so much that goes into the answer. So it's really funny that you say that.
Clarissa brought up a really good point. And for those who may not be following the chat, I want to talk to this. Companies don't use any of these titles consistently. Mm-hmm. And part of what we're dealing with is, let's go back to this. This is a field. Okay, so knowledge management as a field. So keep in mind, content design sprung from a few different places. UX design, knowledge management, a few different places that content design came out of. Authoring, writing, all sorts of different places, conglomerate. Knowledge management as a field was really only come about in the 1980s. So who's my knowledge manager again? 1980s. So is when that field came about. That ain't too long ago, actually. Now, and content, UX content, we really started seeing that accelerate 8 years ago, if that. Maybe. So, and yeah, 8 years ago, people started going, oh, words on screen. And then 4 or 5 years ago, oh, the words on our screen, And so we're learning our words, and we're learning our words in a place at a time that new technologies are available. 10 years ago, Alexa was a dream. Nobody was dealing with a conversational bot there. 15 years ago, a voice dial system, you just press buttons. Now the voice system is expected to understand what you're saying, and you still yell at it to speak to an agent, but you're expecting it to know what you're saying. Pressing a button, stupid. Who has time to press buttons? We're making the phone call going down the interstate at 70 miles an hour. Multitasking. So you're talking about a field that's constantly moving and changing. So yeah, right now, if I was searching for a job right now, I would search knowledge manager, content designer, content strategist, UX writer, UX designer. No, not UX design. UX content strategist, copywriter. I know I'm knowledge management specialist. Yeah, those are just words that have come off the top of my head that I'm thinking through.
It's the same on like the design side. They don't use titles consistently. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's so confusing, and it's hard for people entering the field to know, well, like, what is this? Even companies don't even know sometimes how many years experience to put on the job application, because, they say, oh, I want 10 years experience, but really, do they need someone with 10 years experience? Maybe not.
Which brings me to the story of Dell, because you just gave me my segue. Dell.
Not like that was planned or anything.
Dell. I want to talk about Dell for a few minutes. Dell is headquartered here in Austin. I remember I said, companies about 4 or 5 years ago were like, we have a problem here. Dell's at the forefront of that. Dell looked over and said, we have words everywhere. We have words everywhere. We have words on our boxes. We have words in pamphlets in our boxes. We have words on our websites. We have words in our telephone systems. We have words in our internal employee tools. We have words in our forums. We have words in everywhere. So they hired a chief knowledge officer and a chief content officer. And they made them C-suite level people. And they took 100% of the words of Dell and brought them into a singular organization, and put content design and content strategy at the top of that. Strategy, how do we want people to feel about our words? What do we want our words to do? What are some of the consistent wordings that we want to use? What's the consistent typeface that we want to use around the globe? The different options. What do we want? What are our words? Voice, tone. And it took them 2.5 to 3 years. They hired over 140 people. And they got their words right. That's FTEs and contract force. They made their content department huge. And they structured it incredibly well. And they turned their content around. And they measured it every step of the way. How customers felt about it. How translations worked. By the way, translation is a whole area into itself that I love working through and with. And so, yeah, Dell was at the forefront of seeing that there was a content problem. eBay did the same thing. Amazon, part of the reason why we lost Sarah Evans is because Amazon wanted to do it and they stole our Sarah. Damn them. So, yeah, companies began to realize that there was a word problem. All right, thank you for letting me share the Dell story. They completely revamped all of their content from ground up.
It makes such a difference in reaching people.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to, at some point, share. I saw a panel last weekend of a group of agencies that came together and they called themselves Team Unanimous. I can't even say it, but this is the group that basically turned around Houston's census count so that they would like reduce the amount of undercount, which is a huge deal, and the words that they chose to reach out and how they chose to reach out through their translations. It was a huge part of it. And it, like, people were recognizing the campaign because the campaign was yes, and like every language it had it in, you know, what is it, Korean and Arabic and like 10 languages and signs and everywhere, and people recognized it even if they couldn't read it. They knew that sign, you know, because of it. So it's fascinating how much even a simple word has such an impact on that. And that brings me actually to my next question, is like, how can content designers make an impact and show their value through the entire design process? And how can you make an impact as a content designer?
Okay, for those who can hear the crying baby in the background, it's not a baby, it's a cat. His name is Jack. I tried to get him to stop. I shook my cat at the cat treats. He would not come down my direction. I'm saying his name just to see if I can get it over here to get some petting. So yes, that is not a neglected baby. It's a neglected cat. So let me start there. All right. So how do we show our worth? And this Anastasia asked, about KPIs and methods of content testing. Different organizations, it's been really interesting talking. It's been really interesting talking to a wide variety of people in different jobs here. HomeAway is housed here in Texas. I've got several friends who are part of the content team at HomeAway. They are a competitor to Vrbo. They own Vrbo, and they are a competitor to Airbnb. So that gives you an orientation for who they are. Their UX designers and their content people work hand in glove. They meet every day as part of Scrum, Agile stand-up, 15 minutes, and they meet once a week in a full hour and a half long meeting to talk about the various projects and where they're at with content. So they are ingrained. Then you have other organizations, eBay, who's just only figured out, damn, content really is as important as we thought it was. And now everybody's fighting over my team because everybody wants my team. So all the VPs were fighting over my team to say who's going to own my team. Thankfully, we got settled with the best VP. This is recorded, right? Wait, I can't say that. All the VPs are great. We got settled with the greatest. So anyways, so sometimes the fight is actually internal to even prove the worth of content design. And sometimes the fight is for the customer. So it depends on where you're at. So with that, how do you prove your worth? Sometimes you're starting at the very bottom and you're taking a page from the organization. You literally take one of their tools and you wipe out 100% of the words on the tool. And you hand a person, the developer, that damn screenshot, and you go, every one of those words that are missing, that's what happens if you lose me. That's why we want to work hand in glove, because this means nothing to our employees without the words. So, and sometimes you get to start a little higher than that, and you're looking at what's your customer impact. You're doing, and this, for those who do UX research, you're going to hear this very similar things. A/B testing. What if we write it this way? What if we write it that way? Focus groups. hey, what do you think of this voice and tone? Does this meet our objectives? What does this voice and tone do? How do you feel coming away from this? What would be your next steps if you received something like this, or you experienced this? It's observing people through their flows. If you have some sort of an action flow, say a conversational bot, and you want to say, hey, use my conversational bot to schedule an appointment for the dentist next week, and you watch how they do that. You hear the conversation. Not only do you hear the conversation, if you can, you watch them in the conversation. You see what they're doing. Are they multitasking? Are they just talking to the bot, looking straight at it with a fierce look, as if it's going to smile back at them? So what's happening in the context and the content environment of the person that's using that bot, and were they successful? It's pooling data points. I mentioned recontact rates earlier, or contact rates. How many times this week did Google get a phone call because their Google Voice messed up and somebody called customer service? Yes, there really is a customer service line for Google.
It's really hard to find though.
Yep. So they do it on purpose. It's a content decision. So eBay did that for a year and a half when we went to at-home employees. And it's this is where content strategy comes in. What's the goal of the organization? And then you measure against the key performance indicators for that. One of the biggest issues this was a bigger issue about 4 or 5 years ago. It's getting better today. People didn't know what to measure. And it's because content was over here writing content, and UX design was over here designing, and the two of them weren't getting together to shake each other's hands and go, we really got to work together when we're looking at this customer interface and how this all works together, and measure it together. I'm going to measure my words separately over here and see what people feel about it. And you can measure your design over here and see what people feel about it. And then let's put it together and make sure it all works together. So we're getting better about that.
That's really interesting. Is there anything that you don't like about your role or any of the responsibilities that you have?
I've got a few UX developers who are still old school, who do not understand the power and importance of content. So it is a constant reminder to stop treating content as a caboose, the last thing you worry about, and start thinking it as the first thing you worry about. Again, nobody goes to a conversational bot. Nobody goes to Alexa to stare at her. They go to Alexa to get whatever it is they're trying to get. So that is, nobody goes to Amazon to stare at the pretty screen and the different parts of the screen. They're going there to make a purchase, and the words on the screen count. So, and how those words are placed count. When you go through a refund flow, the words on the screen help you get through that refund flow. Without those words, you're not getting anywhere. Pick a button, guess what you got, with no words beside it. So developers, old school developers, still don't understand content because they came through development school 12, 15 years ago. And when developers wrote what was on the screen, and you just dealt with it. And so that's, and you see it in multiple organizations, and you see it with old school developers and old school designers. New school designers, they get it. They're like, oh, where's my content person? Please come over. We had a UX researcher who was phenomenal. She's like, where's my content person? Who do I need to talk to? It's like the first day she was there. And I'm like, yes, this is new school versus old school, and it makes a difference. The other thing too is this is not the career field for you if you don't like to move fast. I am working on 19 concurrent projects. I am consulting on 19 concurrent projects. And I still manage to work a 45-hour work week because I won't work 46. So time management, and knowing my boundaries. So, yeah, it's being able to multitask. And some days it's a case of there is nothing else you can put on my plate. I am carrying a tray. Stop it. So, yeah. Now ask me what I love.
Yeah, I would love to know. Like, what do you
I
love to do?
love managing content for 21 countries and languages. A combination of 21 countries and languages. I love that. I love being at the center. Like Biden administration was hosting meetings with e-commerce companies, and I was able to sit in on those conversations before the rest of the world was hearing information coming out of that administration. So that was really cool. And I can speak to that because that's public knowledge. Yay! So, so I get to be in the know about what's happening where. And it doesn't matter where you're working at. If you're in content, you know what the organization's doing. You know what the organization is working on, because you're often helping 3 or 4 or 5 different projects get off the ground. And you know, think about your own group, Cindy. You know, if you have a content strategist, you know, there might be 3 or 4 different teams working on 3 or 4 different projects, but that content strategist is horizontal across most of them. And so if you want to be in the know and the center, and you want to be the go-to girl or guy, it's the job.
For sure. Totally. When I worked at the clinic and I did a lot of that content, I knew everything. Everybody came to me. And I got pulled into internal, external, all kinds of stuff. That's great. I feel like we touched on a couple of these questions that I have about the most exciting thing about the content designer world right now, that it's just growing and expanding. But is there anything to add on to that?
Being frank, the salary is incredible. Because we're in such high demand. The salary, even for entry level in the right area, is fantastic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
And I know that, you know, frankly, I know that that's important to some people.
Mm-hmm.
So,
particularly as the cost of living rises, especially the way that it is in Austin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Gotta support living here. I want to touch on skills, the skills needed for people moving into content design, and then skills that will be needed as the role evolves over time.
Project management, communication, not just in the form of writing, but communication in the form of asking questions, knowing how to ask questions, knowing, being willing to go figure out who to ask the question to, networking. So that networking within an organization, so that way you understand who you need to go ask what. Problem solving and negotiation. A UX designer will tell you, I'm only going to give you this much space to write your content, and that's all I'm going to give you. And you'll argue back with him that you need, or her, you need this much space. And you guys go back and forth, and you know, you're stuck because they already locked it in at this much space. So how do you get what you need to get into this amount of space? Problem solving. Of course, writing, but don't assume that you have to be a perfect writer. In my team, we have had, and she's gone on to do project management full time now, but she would tell you that she was a beauty school dropout. She failed beauty school. She's high school graduation, beauty school dropout, could do her hair phenomenally. I'm so jealous of her hair. And she was not a perfect writer, but she was perfect in terms of being able to ask the right people the right questions and so she managed internal content where the content didn't have to be perfect because it was not external facing. So who cares if you use me or I in a sentence? As long as you had the words there and the teammate could understand it or the employee could understand it. But she had a phenomenal networking skills. So it's not always external content. Sometimes you're working on internal content. So if you're like, I don't know if I've got all the right words, look for a position that works on internal tools. That might be the right place for you. An eye for keeping whoever your customer is at the center. How do you talk to that? That's work on that. Work on talking about how, and it doesn't matter if it's your external customer or your internal customer. Because one of the things that happens with content people, and I see this all the time, people change person, unchanged environment, the environment wins every single time. Okay, you walk in, you know how to speak the language of the customer, right? But you hang out with all of these other internal employees for so damn long, you start speaking the employee language and you stop speaking the customer language. And so the next thing you know, it filters into your words. So learn to put the customer, whoever your customer is, at the center of your words, and start it on Twitter. It's not about you on Twitter. It's about who's reading your stuff. It's not about you on TikTok. It's about who's your audience and what do you want them to feel when they come to your stuff. So, and if you can talk to that in an interview about how you keep your customer, internal, external, at the center of everything you do, you've got a major win, because that's what they're looking for, because they know they got too many people speaking their own language and they need somebody who speaks the customer's language. All right, off the soapbox.
Well, it sounds like that's some of the advice that you would give someone wanting to come into the field. Is there anything else that you would give as advice if for someone that's like, I want to do this, this sounds like a good field for me?
I think I've given advice throughout this.
Yeah.
So I don't know that there's any last.
So we'll just have to go back and watch the recording if we missed it.
Yeah, I think my big thing is, years and years ago, somebody said to me, do what you fear the most. Do what you fear the most. And if you fear that you're not going to be a good content designer, but you really want to be a content designer, go do it. Go do what you fear. Because the people that are nervous, I used to teach. I was a staff development specialist in libraries. And I asked a staff development specialist, a teacher who had been teaching for years, I'm like, are you still nervous when you go into the classroom? And he said, yes, I still am. And he said, the day that I'm not, I'm going to quit. And he said, because that nervousness, that fear is where you're actually passionate. And it's just showing up as fear. It's just showing up as nervousness. So if you're scared about making the transition, it's just nervousness. Lean into it and then get past it.
It's a great question in here about how what to include in the portfolio for a content designer, especially because, I mean, on the UX side, there's very specific like advice on how to write a case study, but it's not necessarily geared toward the content designer. What would be your advice? I know you mentioned doing some A/B studies, writing content for a bot. What would that look like in a portfolio?
You're hearing this long pause for me because content is so broad. Think about how broad it is. We've been talking about all this time, all the different things that form as content. So how do you put your portfolio together? Can you put together different types of content that you've done? If you've done can you put together a portfolio that shows a web page and another portfolio? There's a knowledge management person in here that shows an internal piece of information, though she's got to be really careful because she can't share anything that's proprietary, is my suspicion. Can you, if you haven't developed anything yourself, can you go grab a website and show what you would do with it? Can you create a mock-up? Can you create a mock-up of an email that the organization might send that you're applying for, the types of organization? For example, if you're going into e-commerce, can you do a mock-up of an email for a completed purchase? If you're going into a company like Cindy's that does a wide variety of things, can you do a Figma mock-up and show how you would do things, and show different options? based on voice, tone, and style. So here's a Figma page, and if you're trying to go friendly, these are the word choices I would go. If you're trying to go direct and professional, these are the word choices I would go. And here's a third. If you wanted to go more of a hip hop slang words, if that's where you're going. So you can show the 3 different ways that you could present information. And that would be really great, because if you do something like that, you're able to show where you can adjust to the organization's voice, tone, and style. And really, when you look at just putting together a Figma like that, it's not a whole lot of effort. It's a whole lot of return. I go back to, if you're doing a conversational bot, mock up a conversation that you would do. Mock up a conversational tree. Go learn about conversational trees and then mock it up. Write out what the flow would look like in a tree hierarchical structure.
Yeah.
Again, not a whole lot of work to do that, a whole lot of return on investment.
Yeah, I can say that, like, content's big.
Mm-hmm.
And that I know you mentioned a couple of books. I wanted to share my favorite book is Content Strategy for the Web, written by Christina Halverson. She's awesome. She does
Don't
a
make me think.
conference. Oh, great book. But Christina does a conference called Confab. And I think it's either happening or just happened or is going to happen really soon. And it's up in Minnesota. So look that up. That's a great place to be around other content people. Tanya, do you have any other resources or books that you would recommend?
Everything I have is expensive. So that's why I'm like pausing. Like APQC in Houston, Association Professional Quality Control, something of that nature. Knowledge World up in DC. God, all the Content Wrangler books. There's an entire series of books called Content Wrangler, and they also have a LinkedIn group. So Content Wrangler, very popular for people entering into the field. There's a great one for Content Wrangler that is, if you go to the Content Wrangler website, they have a dictionary, a glossary on their page that talks about all the different words inside of content. And when you can speak the language, it's not a bad thing. Oh, I feel like I need more. It's like, because, and the other pause that you're hearing from me, we're 24 months, into that, into the pandemic. So there were things that were available pre-pandemic that were not available now. There was a document writing group that was phenomenal, and they've disbanded post and then here in Texas, in the Austin, we have, and if Kristen is my KM person, I think. We have here in Austin one of the largest knowledge management groups that meet with one another. And again, knowledge management, great place to pivot into content.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up on close to the end of our evening together. So I wanted to see if there was any final thoughts, anything that you wanted, like you're like, oh, we didn't talk about this, I have to say this kind of thing to wrap up tonight.
No, I feel like I've chatted enough, and I wish some sort of brilliant end statement, but I don't have that available. And I'm smart enough as a content designer to know to just go, let's leave this place white space.
Love it. I love it. Tanya, you're amazing. Thank you so much for, basically turning this into a fireside chat. This has been awesome. I love all of your insight. Could we give some reactions, clap for Tanya? Yay.
If you're interested in a content strategy role or a content design role, be sure to connect with me on LinkedIn. We just posted a content strategy role yesterday or the day before. And we are about to post a content designer role within the next couple of weeks. We're actually posting 2 content designer roles. And I will tell you, I work at a phenomenal organization. I am not exaggerating when I say that I get to come into work every day and I do not dread where I work. We've got human leadership that has leaned into being human, and that is fantastic.
That is awesome. Well, LinkedIn for Tanya. I hope everybody connects. Join our Slack group. I put the join link in if you haven't already joined. Let's keep the conversation going. Maybe we'll have a subgroup on content under UX and ATX.
Ooh,
Thank you.
bring it on. I got friends I can bring into that conversation.
Great. And stay tuned. We'll hopefully we can put together a larger panel on content at a future date before the end of this year.
And that would be worth it. If you've come to this and she puts together another one with a larger panel, you know, there are some really interesting things in the conversational design world. I was actually slacking a friend of mine before we started to see if I could pull him in for the evening, and he already had a thing with his kids. Darn. But it's, you know, the different specialties that you have out there, we each have a different bent on the world. It is worth hearing about a conversational designer's day, because you hear a lot of the UX research that goes into it on a day-to-day basis, and a lot of the politics. Everybody thinks they own a conversation. Everybody thinks they own the conversation. So there's a lot of politics in conversational design. And then you get with other people who are, you know, product facing content, which Cynthia's company actually deals a lot with. And there's another bent to it. So, and, you know, we didn't even get into taxonomy development, which is a huge area of content. And I spent 24 months in, and I had the opportunity to redo all of the taxonomy for customer service help at eBay. That was huge. Pages and pages and pages. Like I could probably cover the library background in just what the taxonomy ended up looking like, as wide and deep as it was, but it was so simple too. So yeah, so different. Yeah, come to the next one. Don't just hear from me. Come to the next one.
Awesome. You heard it here first, folks. All right. Thank you all for coming. I'll see you on, what is it, May 27th. So we'll get that up as soon as we get the rest of our panelists confirmed. In the meantime, y'all have a wonderful evening. And thank you for joining us tonight. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.